Church, we have been looking forward to Easter for quite a while now. We have been looking forward to Easter because we know the end of the story. We knew what was coming. Lent, the journey forward, all the stories leading up always seem so much more bearable when we know the end of the story. Even when we dwell on the Last Supper, the tension in the room, the sadness, and even the impending betrayal. Even when we remember the crucifixion, when we focus on the most painful parts of the story, we look forward to Easter because we know the end. But for those who lived it, for those who walked the journey that first resurrection day, it must have felt so much different. It must have felt so different. All of the traumatic events that had led up to this, Jesus' arrest in the garden, guards coming into their safe space, and Peter's attempt to fight back, drawing his sword. The trial of Jesus, where Peter shows us the other extreme in denying and trying to take flight in the midst of a traumatic moment. During the trauma of the crucifixion, Jesus enduring physical and emotional abuse at every turn on his way to the cross. And then while on the cross, sharing his emotions, his feelings about the whole thing, bearing both his body and his soul to those who were present. Jesus' life has been giving profound meaning 2,000 years later. But for those who lived it, it must have felt much different. I wonder how they handled the energy, all of that trauma within their bodies, all of that angst, that worry, that fear built up inside them. I wonder what they did with all of that emotion that had to have overwhelmed them, like waves hitting them one after the next. I wonder what emotions they could name in the moment. I wonder if they had any concept of the why. I wonder if they had any concept of the why, of the reasoning, if they were even able to wrap their brains around it, or if they were just overwhelmed with everything going on. Think about how sleepless their nights must have been from Friday to Sunday. Think about the tears, the bags under their eyes as the women came to the tomb early that morning from lack of sleep and crying, dwelling in the darkness of all that had happened and all the darkness they must have assumed was still to come. They come to visit Jesus' tomb, to remember, to express their grief and their sorrow. They came and they found it empty. A stone rolled away, and they peered into the darkness. They looked into the darkness of the cave. They looked into the darkness, and they found nothing. Darkness had nothing to offer them. Jesus was not there, and beyond a simple truth, the truth that this had happened, a realization that something had changed, a realization of what was not. After that moment, the darkness had no more for them. It didn't stop them from looking again. They kept looking into the tomb, looking for Jesus, looking into the darkness for the light. But it was just a dark cave, and it had no answers for them. The angel tells them, "Stop looking for the living among the dead." They might have said, "Stop sitting in the darkness and go look in the light." 2,000 years later, we're still obsessed with this cave. Have you noticed our obsession with the cave and the events that lead us to it? To the dark tomb and what gets us there. When there's a story told of Jesus' life, how much of it is spent on the suffering before and how much is on the resurrection and the light post? How much drama goes into the gore and the body, blood, and sweat and torture of Jesus, and how much goes into the resurrection and the ascension? We see Hollywood take on the Jesus story over and over, and they obsess on the darkness. Sure, they get us to Easter, but that's not nearly as glorifying or gorifying to our national consciousness. We are obsessed with the darkness of the cave and how we got there. We keep looking in the darkness for light. Devotions are written on the pain and sorrow of Jesus. Archaeologists still search for that exact spot, for the sacred things, for the linen wrappings from that cave, artifacts from that tomb. When was the last time you heard someone say, "We think we found the spot where Jesus was standing when the women turned and saw him outside"? We think we found the spot where he met with the disciples on the Emmaus Road. We think we found the space where he appeared to them later. We think we found the space where he ascended, where he gave the great commandment, where he gave the commission. No, it's where did he die? Where did he bleed? Where was the dead body? We are obsessed with the cave and the darkness. Yet God tells us, stop dwelling in the darkness and look for Jesus in the light. Go live your life. Yes, the sad things have happened, but it's time to move on, to look for Jesus in the light. Now, sometimes that darkness comes without invitation. We did not choose it. Sometimes the darkness comes through the pain of others. Sometimes it comes from grief or lost love. Sometimes it comes from sorrow of the community around us. Sometimes it comes from hurt people who hurt people. We don't always choose the darkness, but once we're there may be light for those women, light for those disciples who ran there. There might be an immediate first lesson, a realization of loss, a recognition that something has changed, that something is different, that reality has shifted for us. But so often we dwell in the darkness, asking it to teach us more. We sit in the hurt and the pain and ask it what else it has to show us. And at those times, we have a choice. We do have a choice. We can pretend that everything's fine and let the darkness grow around us. We can give in and give up and make the darkness our home. We can sit and wait, hoping someone will come rescue us from the darkness. Or we can follow the example of Jesus. We can follow Jesus' example, sharing our pain and proclaiming our truth to anyone who will hear it, sharing our feelings, trusting our emotions with others, friends and strangers alike, sharing love with those who love us, sharing our life with those around us, forgiving and seeking reconciliation, forgiving and risking a life shared with others. Now, living in the light is still full of dangers, right? Living in the light doesn't mean life gets easy. The fear of some would beg us to stay in the darkness with them. The hurt of some would beg us to lash out in a revenge-soaked violence with them. Anger of someone would beg us to blame and live in shame all alone. Living in the light opens us to these dangers. It invites critique of our courage. It invites a mocking of our grace, a judgment of the love that we would share. Living in the light means we will constantly combat what a friend of mine calls a spirit-sapping mindset of fatalism. When you choose to live in the light, there are sources of frustration, of anger, of hurt around you that will try to suck you back down. A spirit-sapping mindset of fatalism. That's those dwelling in the cave and calling it home. That's those who found comfort in the darkness and haven't found the courage to move forward. And oh, when life is hard, it can seem so easy to fall back and just stare into the darkness, hoping it will teach us again one more lesson about how broken we are, how wrong we are, and how much easier it is just to give up. A spirit-sapping mindset of fatalism. The pull of the darkness is a sham, a scam. It is something to convince us there is safety to be found in brokenness, when we know that all that there is in brokenness is an immediate realization of loss. The lessons The lessons come when we dare to step back into the light. Hiding in the tomb might feel safer for those who've been hurt, and some might even wonder why Jesus ever left. Some might wonder, Jesus, they mocked you, they abused you, they ignored you. Even those who were closest didn't pay attention. Why would you go back to them? They may wonder why Jesus ever left the tomb. But Jesus knows what we know. And that's that the light has power. The light is powerful. It gives meaning to the past, even when the past is full of hurts. It gives hope in the face of fears, even when that fear is of our own self and our own failure. We know that light leads to forgiveness, and forgiveness can bring us reconciliation and wholeness. We know the light leads to wholeness. It is a path beyond being a victim. It is a path beyond being an offender to others and to ourselves. It leads us beyond these cycles of pain and hurt. We know that the light invites us to connect with God, to be reminded of our own worth, our own beauty, our own potential and strength. Living in the light invites us to imagine what we might transform in ourselves and in the world around us. No more hiding in the tomb. No more obsessing on the cave. No more focusing on the death of Jesus, because the life of Jesus is what calls us to rise. It is the life of Jesus, not the death of Jesus, that invites us to rise up from brokenness and find wholeness, to rise up from fear and share hope. As I go through this next section of the sermon, I'm going to need your help. If I say rise up, I need you to repeat it. And if I say it too passively, you will help me out. We're going to practice this. Rise up. Rise up. Rise up. You're ready. One of the last churches I served in Indiana, there was a woman there named Susan. The outgoing pastor told me I needed to get to know her quickly, because anytime I felt discouraged in my life or work, she would remind me. She would remind me what it's about. So I sat down with Susan as soon as I could, and I asked her about her story. She had dealt with cancer, a vicious cancer that she thought would take her life. Well, it didn't take her life, but it transformed her body. She could no longer do all she used to do. She was not what she used to be. It transformed her relationships. It changed her relationships, her closest relationships, forever. Mostly for hurt. It changed her family. Her relationships with family would never be the same. The cancer had changed it all. It had put her in such a dark place. She no longer felt like herself. And somewhere in that darkness, Susan says, she realized her loss and she found a light. God met her at her darkest place. Deep in that cave that she was dwelling in, God found her and met her there and invited her out. And she knew she had a choice: to be brave and step into the light, into life again, or to stay in that darkness till it consumed her. And so she stepped up and she stepped out. She decided the church would be her family and her community, and she would see where God took her. A new start with a new attitude. A new start that opened new doors. A new start that led her to claim a new name. I have no idea what Susan's last name was. When I met her, she was Susan Phoenix. She had given herself the name of that mythical bird that rises from the ashes, that's reborn constantly in the fire and the challenge of life, that lets go of its scars and becomes something new and beautiful. And she was. She took on a new name, and it gave her new meaning. She was a new creation in God. Susan focused on the life of Jesus. She lived a life that was worth living, and we all watched her rise up. Covina Community Church has had its struggles over the years. Attendance at one point was way down, giving was down, spirits were down. But we focused on the ministry of Jesus. We kept living in the light. We kept sharing the light with those in need. Instead of blaming how we got there, instead of obsessing over what was past, what wasn't, what we would never be again. Instead of focusing on what we were not, we saw what we could be. And our community around us has watched us rise up. Our community, our neighborhood has watched the Rainbow Church rise up. We have seen those who are hurt watching us, and they've watched us rise up. A safe community for all God's people. We've seen those who are judged by others watching us, and they have seen us rise up. A place of grace where everybody knows they are welcome and safe. We've seen people dwelling in the darkness watching us as we rise up. A place where everyone can live in the light regardless of how much that darkness called. We are called to be a light in the darkness, called to offer them a choice, offer them a healing journey that invites them to rise up. And we will cheer them on. We will cheer on each other. We will celebrate each other as we rise up. We will celebrate new friends as they rise up. We will celebrate those in need who we've yet to meet as they rise up. And we will worship God together with wholeness. Christ is risen, and so shall we rise up. Amen.